కొంచెం తీసుకుంటున్నాను బ్యాలెన్స్ మాట్లాడతాను రికార్డ్ అవుతుంది. So in the yesterday's class, we were discussing about how the scheduling will be done. In the last class, we have discussed how the maintenance jobs have been scheduled and what are the areas they concentrate in the scheduling, and how the maintenance planning is done. Right. And we have also discussed yesterday in the yesterday's class, the failure data analysis, where we were talking about that how this FEMA is helping the different sectors like automobiles, medical sector, or hospitality industry in identifying the defects, identifying the failure areas, and try to increase the quality of the product and reach out for the customers satisfaction. So FMEA, wherein we have seen the 10 steps process, how they try to go on with the FMEA analysis. See this, identifying the components, identifying the failure modes, then identifying the effect of the failure mode, whether it is severe or whether it is light, determine the severity, right? Then rate it that whether it is very high, whether it is hazardous, and identify the causes of failure mode, determine the probability of occurrence, identifying the controls, determine effectiveness of current controls, calculate the risk priority number. So we have seen the risk priorities 0 to 1 to 3, 1 to 5. Then they will make a form in this way. Right. So what are the components? What is the effect? What is the failure mode? What is the effects? What are the causes? Right. So in the step by step process, they will try to note it in a documented form. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. So for every machinery or for every equipment, they will try to do the failure analysis in this way. And they have given some examples for us. The risk and the probability of occurrence ratings: unlikely, low, moderate, high, very high. Then we have none, very minor, the impact. Right, very minor, minor, very low, low, moderate, high, very high, hazardous with warnings. Right, so in this way, they will try to see the impact and try to rate theirs. So what are the benefits we have discussed? Obviously, whenever we are trying to identify the failures and rectifying it at the earlier stage, automatically there will be no defects in the product. So whenever there are no defects in the product, the consumer satisfaction will definitely increase. FMEA applications we have seen, it is used in aerospace, automobile industry, healthcare industry. For every device, they go with the pre-check. So this failure analysis in the pre-check will try to identify what are the components, where is the failure, and will try to reduce the risk of failure or breakdown in the machinery. Then we have also seen failure data and analysis. How we are analyzing the failure metrics. So failure metrics are analyzed in the form of labor hours spent on maintenance. So how many labor hours are they are spending on maintenance, and the number of breakdowns. Breakdowns means what? The idle time. The machinery is being kept idle whenever there is a repair. So that is known as the number of breakdowns. Operational time to can be calculated from total expected operating hours per week minus the total equipment downtime. So how many hours it is working minus the total downtime will give the operational time. So these are different metrics the companies will be using whenever they are trying to organize the maintenance records. Uh, I think you are able to see the screen. So we will discuss today how the data is collected. Right. So what is data? Data is a proper organized information that is giving us an idea about any of the aspect. So here data is an accurate information. Right. So how the data is collected? So data collection is a method of how we collect the data, how we measure the data, how we analyze the accurate insights for research using validated techniques is considered as data collection. So we have two types of data, primary data and the secondary data. So a researcher can evaluate the hypothesis or based on the basis of collected data. So what I told, data collection is the primary and most step of research. So what is primary data? The primary data is the first-hand information collected from the different sources, which is collected either by observation or either by survey method or either by interview techniques. We are trying to collect the first-hand information and we are trying to analyze it. Right. So the most critical objective of data collection is we will try to take some decisions based on the collected data, and this can be used for research. Right. So what is data collection? Data collection is we are trying to use the data, we are trying to collect the information with the objective that we are collecting a reliable information and which information which will be used for our statistical analysis to take the data driven decisions that can be made useful in the research. Right. So here, when you talk about failure analysis, so what is failure analysis? Failure analysis is the collection of the data which is making us understand what are the causes of failure, often with the goal of determining corrective actions or liability. So what is failure analysis? Failure analysis is the process of collecting and analyzing the data that is causing the failure in the machinery. Right. So what is the goal of collecting this data? The goal of collecting this data is determine the corrective actions wherever the failure is being occurred. According to Block and Geithner, machinery failures reveal a reaction chain of cause and effect, usually a deficiency, commonly referred to as a symptom. So, what Block and Geithner is telling that whenever there is a machine failure in the machine, it reveals a chain of the cause and the effect. What is the cause and what will be the effect of the failure? And usually the deficiency is being considered as the symptom, right? So deficiency means what? It is a symptom for failure analysis, right? So why we do say failure analysis? Failure analysis can save the money, lives and resources if done correctly and acted upon. So whenever we are identifying that, okay, the machinery is having a defect or deficiency or there is a symptom of failure and we rectify it, we can be able to save the money, we can able to save sometimes lives, and we can able to effectively utilize the resources because we have seen so many accidents happening which are taking lives of the people because there is no proper failure analysis that is happening on that particular machine, right? So why there is a failure in the blast furnace? Why there is a failure in the cranes? Most of the times we see the cranes get on breakdown, and uh, in middle the people are dying, falling from the crane, right? From the height distances, whenever there is no proper fencing or there is no proper support, they fall down from that particular height distances. Whenever there is more grease and whenever they are not cleaning, they just fell down. So these are all wherein we will try to see that the lives of the people are affected. So by this failure analysis, we can try to reduce this. Then we have, so it is an important discipline in many branches of manufacturing, such as electronics industries, where it is a vital tool in development of new products and for the improvement of existing products. So to perform a quantitative analysis, events which are subjected to reliability analysis, such as failure or repair, the data collection is required, and these events are stochastic phenomena, and therefore we have to make some statistical analysis for collected data. So here we are having two types of data. Whenever we are just collecting the data, we are having two types of data: quantitative data and qualitative data. So what is quantitative data? Which can be expressed or which can be displayed, which can be translated into number form. Right. So whatever the data that we are collecting is in the numeric form, or can be displayed in a numeric form, or can be presented in a numeric form and analyzed mathematically, and which is giving us an information related to number in the form of numbers, is called quantitative data. Then qualitative data is something which is describing the data, wherein it is collected in the form of descriptions, anecdotes, opinions, quotes, interpretations. So these cannot be converted into numbers. So right, qualitative data is an opinion that has been made by the people. So as you might expect, quantitative and qualitative information need to be analyzed differently. So opinions can be expressed in one way, and quantitative data can be expressed in one way. So there are different statistical tests which will be used for quantitative data, and there will be different statistical tests which will be used for qualitative data. So we cannot use the same statistical measure for both the data. So some data will be in a quantitative form, some data will be in a qualitative data form. Right. So what is quantitative data? For example, the frequency of specific behaviors or conditions. Right. So the belt is coming out from the machine very often. So the frequency of coming out of the machinery is maybe 5 times, 6 times. So how often the belt is coming out, and it is creating the problem for the machinery. Right. So that is the frequency. So the rate, duration of specific behaviors or conditions. Test scores. Right. Test scores, example, the levels of knowledge, skills, etc. They can be expressed in the quantitative form, 5, 7, 10 marks. Right. So that will be test score. Survey results. Survey results are reported behavior or outcomes to environmental conditions, ratings of satisfaction, such as stress, etc. The number of percentages of people with certain characteristics. So these all can be the quantitative data that we are collecting in the form of for the data for the failure analysis. Right. So day, month, year. Then we have qualitative data. So qualitative data is, they are not numbers, they are just the opinions or the interpretation. Right. So here, unlike numbers, they are hard data, Qualitative information tends to be soft, meaning it can be always be reduced to something definite. So here we go with Likert scale. So whenever we go with opinions, we will tell that rate the information from 1 to 5 range. Right. So 1 is not good, 2 is okay, 3 is we cannot say anything, 4th is excellent, 5 is very much excellent, or you can go with 5 to 1 scaling. So it depends on you what type of scaling you are going to use for understanding the levels of satisfaction or understanding the level of belongingness. Right. So they are all qualitative data. So collection and data analysis for evaluation. So how the data is evaluated. So whenever we are collecting the data, we will try to either collect in the qualitative form or we will try to collect in the quantitative form. And these data is maybe a primary data or maybe a secondary data. So what is primary data? The primary data is the first-hand information that you are collecting for the purpose of analysis. If at all these data is already published and used for the secondary purpose, then it is known as secondary data. So how the primary data is collected? The primary data can be collected either by observation, either by interview method, either by scheduling method, or either by the survey techniques. And the secondary data can be collected in the form of records, in the form of journals, in the form of periodic journals, in the form of reports that have been already published in government books or literature that is earlier found based on that topic are been considered as secondary data. So here, whenever they are going with the failure data analysis, they will try to see that whether they have been depending on the on the secondary data for the fresh data or whether they are reliable on the historical data, that is the secondary data, which is giving them an information that whether the machinery has already been failed in the past 1 year or in the past 2 years, are there any consequences wherein the machinery has been a failure. Yeah. So here, whenever we are collecting the data, how we are interpreting the data? How we are interpreting the data. So what we are trying to analyze in the data. So here we will try to see that what are the variables that are being associated with the data, variables which are associated. So when we talk about variables is what? The factor that is being changing. What is a variable? The factor that is continuously changing is considered as a variable. So whenever we are analyzing the data, we have independent variables and dependent variables. So we'll try to see how the dependent variable is affected and causing the changes to the independent variable. Right. So what are the aspects that they will try to go on? They can uncover factors that may be associated with changes in the dependent variable. So they will try to explore, they will try to discover the unexpected influences which are affecting the dependent variable. Dependent means what? It is dependent and it is getting affected. So it is getting changed. So what are the factors that are changing the dependent variables? So they will try to explore. Uncover means what? They will try to explore all the factors that are associated with the dependent variables which are going on changing. Then they can show the connections between or among factors they may have an effect on the results of their evaluation. So here they will try to see that how these variables are correlated, how these variables are connected with each other. Whenever they are dependent, it means that they are somehow correlated. So this correlation may be a positive correlation or negative correlation. In one way, they are being correlated. So whether the relation may be very friendly or whether the relation may be rivalry, right? Right. So here the data where what we are analyzing, we are seeing that how these dependent and independent variables are associated. We are also seeing what is the relationship between the dependent and the independent variables, whether they are positively correlated, whether they are negatively correlated, or whether they are having a equal correlation. Right. So they have correlation is specifying us how they are getting connected with each other, how they are having an association with each other, and how there is an increase or decrease in the association is being considered as population. So this been considered as correlation. They can help shed light on the reasons that your work was effective or perhaps less effective than you hoped. So these data, whatever the data that we have collected, will help us in understanding whether the work is effective or whether it is less effective or whether it is not up to the mark as you have hoped. Right. So by combining this qualitative and quantitative analysis, one can determine what is the impact of the data, and they can just work out by combining the quality. They may just work out that they are being working or not. Then the fourth factor is they can provide you the credible evidence to show the stakeholders that your program is successful. So whenever we are having a recorded data, whenever we are having a statistical figures, that whenever we show it in the form of diagrams, or whenever we show it in the form of outcomes, or whenever we show it in the form of numerical form, definitely it is giving a clear evidence to the stakeholders that we are having an effective environment and we are trying to address all the limitations that have been happening here. Then their use shows that you are serious about evaluation and about your working, right. So the data can be used for review regarding the progress and the improvement that we have made. Then they can show the field what you are learning and thus pave the way for others to implement successful methods and approaches. So these data will help them to go with the successful method and approach. So implementation of measurement system. So how we are trying to measure it, how we are trying to understand the data. Right. So here we have to clearly describe the measurements or observations that are being needed. Then we have to train the observers that what the data, how the data is recorded and how the conditions are there and how they have to analyze the data. Then they have to go with then they have to conduct observations at the appropriate times, at an appropriate period of time, and they will have to do the review. They have to reclean the material. They have to conduct the interviews. They have to conduct the surveys and directly engage them in the direct observation. That is almost they have to involve in the field work. Then they have to record the data in the agreed upon ways and they have to analyze the data. So we have to measure the data. Right, then we talk about organizing the data. So whenever we are collecting the data, we are collecting in the recorded form or some video form or audio form. Right, so or we will record it in the form of software, in the form of documents or files. Right, so each enter any necessary data into the computer. This means simply typing comments, descriptions into the word processing program. So here we are trying to maintain a small word processing program which will collect the data in electronic form. Transcribe any audio or video tapes. This makes them easier to work with and copy and allow the opportunity to clarify any hard to understand passages of speech. So here sometimes we try to depend on the transport and the audio system data where the processes are very clumsy, then they will try to see that they are using some recorded form. So either you try to record it in the audio or video tape form, or you just make them easier to copy. You score any tests and record the scores appropriately. Right. So this is how you try to collect the data and organize the data. So, that's a simple counting, graphing, visual inspection of frequency over time. Right. So you can just represent the data analysis in a very simple form, either in a mean, median, mode, or average, or some qualitative using qualitative data. We can go with interviews, conversations, and participant observation to observe. Journals can be particularly revealing in this area because they record people's experiences and reflections over time. Right. So this is what about the collection of the data. Right. So we are collecting the data in different forms. We are measuring the data in different forms. We are analyzing the data in different forms. We are presenting the data in various modes. And we are using so many statistical analysis to determine or to observe or to identify the behavior of the data and to present the data. We are using some statistical analysis. Then what is M time T repair? So what is MTTR? Mean time to repair refers to the amount time required to repair a system and restore to a full functionality. So whenever there is a machine breakdown, what happens? We have to repair it. So what is the term that we are using? Mean time to repair. So what is mean time to repair? It is the average time that has been required for a system to get repaired and restored it to the full functionality. So how do you calculate the MTTR? To calculate MTTR, we divide the total maintenance time by total number of maintenance actions in a given period of time. So MTTR equal to what? Total maintenance time divided by total number of repairs will give you the MTTR, that is average mean time. So if at all the total maintenance time is 1 hour and the total number of repairs that have been done are 3. So what is the average MTTR? It is 20 minutes. So every efficient maintenance system always needs to look at how to reduce MTTR as such as possible. They can be done in different ways. Then is mean time to recovery. It is a measure between the time, between the point at which the failure is first discovered and until the point where the equipment requires to operation. So this is known as mean time to recover. Then mean time between failure. So between the first failure and the second failure. So the second failure metric will cover is mean time between failures. MTBF measures the predicted time that passes between one previous failure or a mechanical or electrical system to the next failure during the normal operation. So this is known as MTBF. So these are different metrics that they are using for understanding the failure. So it may be the mean time between failures, mean time recovery rate, or mean time operations rate, MTTR, time rate. So you just remember the formulas of all these MTTF, MTBF, MTTR, and just understand how these concepts are being used in analyzing the data. So here, what are the important words you have to understand here? What is quantitative data and what is the qualitative data? So quantitative data is the number, the numeric representation of the data. Qualitative data is, it is not represented in the numeric form, but it is represented in a qualitative or something soft form, which is helping us to interpret the data based on their opinions. So here just see the important questions. We have MTTF, mean time failure, mean time between failures, and FMECA, the failure mode critical analysis. Then what is data? What are the various types of data? What are the various types of data? We have primary data and the secondary data. Explain the process of failure mode analysis. The process, the 10 steps process. Right, so these are the important aspects in the failure management. Right, so in the next class, we'll go with the replacement. So what we have discussed, whenever the machinery is in failure, we will either repair it or we will try to replace it. So whenever we are repairing it and whenever we are trying to replace it, we will try to do a cost analysis. That what is the cost incurred for repair and how effectively the machine is being improvised. Or either we will try to see that if at all the machine has become obsolescent, then we will try to buy a new machine so that it will try to reduce our errors. Right. So here that is known as replacement decision. So whether we have to buy the machinery or whether we have to use the same machinery or whether we have to go with the replacement, which will help us to reduce the errors. So that is known as replacement decision. So in the next class, we'll be dealing with the replacement decision. So whenever you are preparing, just to try to see on with the examples how the organizations are determining the MTTR, MTBF, MTTB, right, and try to understand how they are rectifying the failure number coming down and how they are increasing the satisfaction levels of the consumers by providing a good quality or zero defect program. Right, so we will stop the class for today and thank you.